After 11 years of flying FPV drones, there's a lot that I've learned. Most of it the hard way. But if I could go back 11 years and give my newbie self back then the tips I know now, I'd avoid so much stress, heartache and anxiety. And I would have had way much more fun. So in this video, I'm going to share those lessons with you so that you don't have to learn them the hard way like I did. Something I see happen far too often is people testing the setups and they've still got the props on. So I'll jump onto Reddit and I'll try and help people out. Although I did get told I was very miserable yesterday because I tried to drop a sarcastic joke about something and people took it literally. So sucks to be me today on Reddit. But I'm always trying to help out people, and what I see way too often, and on Facebook as well, is people will post a video up and say, right, I've just tested this and this has happened, and you can see the props are on. Seriously, all it takes is for you to bump into that quad. I've got a monitor that's right next to where my work surface is. I could smash that monitor up, I could knock the controller and it would take out half of the lights in this room, or it would even take out my hand, or even worse. So always test with your props off. I know people that have been seriously injured. Now this is one I see happen quite often. People will buy themselves a nice brand new bind and fly drone, and somebody online has said, make sure you update Betaflight. So they do. They flash it, they reboot it, and the receiver doesn't work, the props won't spin, and it's just dead. So to avoid this, the most important thing that you need to do is make a backup of your configuration before you flash any new version of Betaflight. To take it even a step further back, in my opinion, if you're buying a bind and fly and you don't necessarily know what you're doing, don't update Betaflight, because it's come out of the factory tuned and ready to go for you, and by messing and changing with it, you're just going to put yourself in a whole world of pain. So get yourself a bind and fly because it's easier for you. Don't make it harder for yourselves. Now this is a difficult one because the cost entry to FPV is really high, but some of the beginner kits are appalling. And you think to yourself, well, if I buy a really cheap beginner kit and get into FPV, I can then sort of just upgrade as I go along. And the reality is ultimately some of the beginner kits are so poor that you're going to not even want to fly FPV ever again after trying it, because the range will suck, the quality of the video will suck, the goggles will suck, and you'll just be like, is this it? And that's before we even get into the quality of the flight and the characteristics. So avoid the kits, save up a little bit of money, and get something that's worth having on a budget rather than the cheapest possible thing. There is an adage, isn't there? Buy cheap, buy twice, and it's very true with FPV. And I will have a video actually out relatively shortly covering 3 of the best items to buy that are the cheapest but worth having, using ChatGPT to try and get yourself some answers. Now this is a relatively new phenomenon and wasn't about back in my day. However, and I understand why people do it, because they'll leave me a comment and it might take me a few hours to respond to it and get you the right answer. And people are in a society now where they want an instant answer to any questions that they've got. So they'll hop onto ChatGPT, they'll put the problem in there, and ultimately it'll drop out an answer to them. And the problem is, most of the time, that answer is nonsensical. So to get a quick answer, it might seem smart to use ChatGPT, right? That is until your quad flips out, your OSD vanishes, or it won't even arm because the information ChatGPT has given you is incorrect. By all means, use ChatGPT for ideas. I do, but always cross-reference the answers you get. Check it with me, check it with people like Bardwell. We can answer your questions, it's not a problem. We're here to help. But just double check the workings out, because ChatGPT, whilst it can be brilliant, it isn't infallible. And this is one that catches a lot of people out, especially newbies. They don't realise that propellers are spinning in different directions. So they'll build themselves a quad, they'll follow the detailed instructions, and then they'll grab themselves a set of props and they'll just throw them on, not realising that certain props have to go in certain directions. So they'll arm the quad and suddenly it'll just flip out, it'll flip over, or it'll spin out, and they'll be like, what on earth's happened? And then they have to sort of go back to the nth degree before they realise, or before somebody points out, one of your props is actually on. So double check them before you even arm it. And the next one's very similar, the wrong motor direction within Betafly. Sometimes we can set up our props and we'll have a look at another drone we've got and we'll copy how those props go on. But that drone might be set to props in and you're setting one up that's set to props out. You're going to have exactly the same problems. The air will be slapped instead of scooped by the props. The drone will either flip out, flip over, or just scream like a banshee. So double check your motor direction. And that's something that we always talk about here, but it is really, really important. On a similar vein, you can go to the field, you can arm up, and all of a sudden it'll flip out. But you've double checked your motor direction, you've double checked all your prop directions, and everything's right, so why is it still doing it? You might well have set your gyro direction or your gyro orientation within Betafly incorrectly. And again, I've got a Betafly video coming out soon, and I'll try and link it in the top corner if it's out by the time I release this, and if it's not, I'll add it at a later date, and that'll show you exactly what I'm talking about and how to double check it and how to change it if it's wrong. Another one on a similar vein that I get emails about virtually every single day is I've taken the props off and I'm testing it, but when I throttle up, it starts to run away. And that's completely normal. So if you are going to test it, the one thing that you're not going to want to test without props on is your throttle values. Test your motor direction, test everything else within Betafly. But if you want to check your throttle is working properly and your motors are spinning properly after you've done the Betafly test, put your props on and go outside, because otherwise the PID loop will be trying to find the differences in the changes that it's expecting. So if you're giving it throttle, that PID loop's expecting it to go up in the air. And if it isn't detecting that it's going up in the air, it's going to increase the throttle and just go full throttle and not stop no matter what you press or what you do until you unplug that battery. That is completely normal, and something, like I say, I get emails about virtually daily. Make sure you do it with the props on, but outside. Now, this was one that wasn't available back in my day. But you go out to the field, you've just made a build or you've just changed something before you left to fly, and you get out to the field and you realise something ain't right. Whether it be it wouldn't arm or whether it be one of your switches was set wrong, you haven't taken a laptop with you, the flight controller you're using doesn't have Bluetooth. As far as you're concerned now, you're out of luck. But luckily, you're not, because if you've got an Android phone, Betafly is now available on Android, and it's a full function, full fat Betafly. All you need is a USB cable from your flight controller to your phone, and you can make all the changes and the adjustments out in the field with the phone that you've got on you. I think we all carry a phone with us when we fly in, so this is really good. I don't believe it's available on iOS as of yet, but I'm happy to stand corrected. But this one has saved me so much. When I first started flying, there'd be many times I'd go out to the field and I'd get there and there'd be something wrong, and it'd just be a little change I needed to make, and I'd have to pack up, come all the way home, make the change and go back out. Whereas now I don't need to do that, and believe you me, that saves a hell of a lot of time. I'll leave a link somewhere for you to download it as well. Get on it, it's really good. Now, this was one I really wish I'd learned earlier, but if you have a drone with T-mount props, oh shit, you may have seen me just move there. Always turn off your soldering iron when you leave the room. I've just realised that I didn't. Luckily, it's gone into standby mode and knocked its temperature all the way down. That could have been a disaster. Now, this is my Avion RC Nexa. It is currently in bits because I am actually just trying to do a little bit of a renovation work on it. But you can see that these props have screws in them as opposed to one big nut. Not a problem, you may think. Just pull the screws in. Believe it or not, it's more common than you would believe that people actually take off without those screws in, or that they're not tight enough. It happened to me. So I did a build and I think I put all the screws in, all the props apart from one in, well, apart from two in one prop, should I say. And I hadn't realised I was very green back in the day. So I took off. I didn't do any pre-flight checks. And I sent the drone legally as far away as I could take it. And then all of a sudden, just in the middle of the flight, it just fell out of the air. And I thought, oh, that's a bit of a strange one. Why on earth has it fallen out of the air? Maybe there's a fault with something. So, it took a while to send my bodyguard to go and recover it. And once they did and they brought it back, it was very evident what had happened. I hadn't screwed in the screws on one of the props, and then the prop had just popped off. So we only had 3 props on the drone fell out of the sky. So as common sense as it might sound, sometimes common sense is not very common. Make sure that those T-motor screws are in and tight. You can also use ones that are too long and over tighten them, and they'll burn your motors out. So make sure you use the right screws, the right tightness before you send it. Any hobby in this world, especially flying drones, is always better when you do it with friends. So imagine yourself, you're out in the field and you're flying away, and boy wonder FPV turns up and says, right, I'm going to plug in. And he plugs in, and all of a sudden your signal gets nuked. It's happened to me, it's happened to only drones. It's one of those things that happens. Now, this can happen on a multitude of different systems, be it analog, DJI, walk snail, HD0. If somebody else plugs in and is on a frequency that's close to your frequency at a power that's powerful enough, it will knock you out of the air. I have seen somebody flying a 7-inch drone with a GoPro get completely knocked out of the air because somebody plugged in a Mavic right next to them. Yeah, these things probably shouldn't happen, but they do. So my tip to you is this. If you're flying on, for example, DJI, and for example, you have FCC enabled on your air unit, one of you choose channel 1 and one of you choose channel 7. Don't set it to auto, because that's when it can jump around and it can sometimes find the channel that you're already on and think, nope, I'm having that, see you later, because you may be a little bit further away than the drone that's next to the other person, so it may be able to cause interference with the channel that you're on. Same goes for walk snail and HD0. Just choose channels that are on the other end of the spectrum. And again, the same goes for analog. Just choose channels that are on the different ends of the spectrum. Another tip, obviously, as well, is to stand, especially with DJI, a good 6 foot apart from the other person, and also don't use full power unless you're going to need it, depending on where you're flying, in which case just stand a little bit further apart. But instead of using 50 megabits, use 25 megabits or 30 megabits and just stand that little bit further apart. Everything will be fine. And once you're both connected, ideally both connect on the ground as well, so don't have one of you flying and the other plug in. But sometimes that can't be avoided at places like, model clubs and stuff like that. But make sure you're locked to a channel, make sure everybody knows what channel you're on, and make sure that they're going to select a different channel than you are, and you'll stay airborne. Now, this is one that hasn't necessarily caught me out, but I have seen it catch other people out. So you might be sat there on a Sunday night browsing AliExpress and thinking to yourself, I've just watched that fella squadding quads, and do you know what? I really want a drone now. So you have a look and you think, well, he said I need goggles and a controller and a drone. So you look for the 3 cheapest ones and you find maybe the walk snail avatar goggles at say $200. They used to be, I think they're about $400 now, not worth it. So you find the walk snail avatar goggles at $200 and you think, brilliant, I'll grab some of them digital goggles. So I'll look for a digital drone now. And you have a look and you find an amazing digital drone. It says it's got HD0 digital in it and it's at a price that you can afford, and you think that drone's going to be really cool with those goggles. And then you have a look for a controller and you see one that's really cheap and it says it's FR Sky, but it looks like all the other ones that I've been using, so it should be fine. And you get them and then you realise very quickly something is wrong. Why will these not connect? We refer to a subset of systems called digital. It would make sense if you don't know the nuances that, well, it's digital, so it should work with whatever it's called. But it's all proprietary stuff. So HD0 will only work with HD0. Walk snail will only work with walk snail, even though, technically speaking, the walk snail system is a derivative of the Cadex air unit. So again, and I've had a few people saying, well, I've got a Cadex air unit, so can I use my DJI goggles which worked with the Cadex air unit on the Cadex walk snail? You can't, no. So DJI to DJI, Cadex to Cadex, or walk snail to walk snail, HD0 to HD0, open IPC to open IPC, and analog to analog. It makes perfect sense when somebody explains it, but I also get that it's very easy to fall into that trap of thinking, well, it says digital, so we should be fine. Sadly, that's not the case. When it comes to, obviously, radio controllers and the control link, again, it's a similar sort of thing. Pick the system you are going to go with. My recommendation in 2025 is either Crossfire or ELRS. My recommendation personally is ELRS because it's slightly cheaper, there's more variety, and there seems to be a faster development pace in ELRS at the moment versus Crossfire. TBS and what they did with Crossfire was one of the reasons I got back into the hobby. When I first started back 11 years ago, we had FR Sky and a range of about 50 meters before you fell out of the sky. Then TBS came along with Crossfire and you could go 40 miles away, not legally. Well, maybe legally at one point, but not anymore. And then obviously ELRS has come along and that's improved it even further, and we've got Gemini and we've got all different sorts of systems now. So it is cheaper. ELRS is a bit more difficult to learn initially, whereas Crossfire, you just plug it in and then if there's an update, so you can update your little module in the back of your radio. If there's an update, you update that and then that will automatically update your receivers. That doesn't happen yet on ELRS, although I'm hoping it will do for newbies' sake anyway. So it's a bit more of a learning curve, but it's cheaper and there's more variety and the pace of development is faster. So let's recap, because that's quite a long one, isn't it? Pick the video system that you want and then choose the goggles based upon the system that you want. In my opinion, right now, the best is going to be DJI. Then I would probably recommend after that HD0, and then after that I would recommend Walksnail and OpenIPC, sort of both at the bottom of that pile. If you want to go analog, why not? Who needs to see branches anyway? Probably one of the most frustrating ones as somebody who tries to help as many people as he can. I'll get messages off people saying, what I've done is I've gone into my PIDs and I've changed all these settings and now the quad flies like trash. And I say to them, first question whenever you reach out to help is, what's your level of knowledge? And quite often the answer comes back will be, I don't really know what I'm doing. So my advice is, if you don't know what you do, don't mess with your PIDs, because you can completely destroy. I mean, you can actually burn out your motors. So, it's not just a case of making it fly bad. But if you don't know what you're doing within the PID settings, there's loads of presets in there that are really good. Select one that's related to the drone you're flying, and 99.9% of the time, unless you're an expert, you'll find that those presets will fly better than anything you could ever do. One thing I used to do all the time, and this killed loads of batteries, is I'd go out flying, I'd come back and I'd just throw my batteries down and then I'd get on with my day. And about a week later or a month later, I'd go back and I'd grab the battery to take out. And I'd either left it too high or too low and it wasn't in storage voltage, and it kills the cells. Now, that's an extreme example. Batteries are a lot better than they used to be, but these things are dangerous. Let's not make any bones about it. Keep your battery safety paramount in your mind. When you come back from a long day's flying, grab your charger out, stick them all onto storage voltage, and get them all back up to 3.85 volts. And once you've done that, pack them away, leave them away until next time, and they'll be fine at that voltage for a very long time. But if you leave them low or you leave them high, the chances you are going to do damage. One of the most difficult things in FPV is nailing the landing. And what I see quite often, and I was completely guilty of this myself, is people going out and practicing the flippy flops, practicing the power loops, practicing the dives, and then they come back in and it's just a hot mess of just panic because they've not practiced the landings. My advice to any newbies out there is grab yourself a fully charged pack, take off, fly in a straight line, turn back around, come back and land. And do that for an entire pack. Take off and land in practice non-stop until you're confident and competent that you can land that drone. Because it's all well and good if you've got a sterile environment around you where you land and you take off. But drones attract people, and the chance is, by the time you're coming back to land, there might be somebody watching you and stood in that sterile environment. And sure, your spotter's going to be able to tell them, hang on a second, he's going to come back and land, but it's not always as simple as that when people are excited. Make sure you can nail a landing, and especially in a tight space. Changing rates all the time. Every single time you go out, right, I've got a different rate or I've got a different camera angle, I'm going to try this. You've got no sort of actionable data behind it to decide whether it was better or worse than the previous one. So if you're going to change your rates, and I went through this last year, by all means do it, but fly for sort of at least 2 weeks with the new rates. Ideally daily if the weather will allow you, to know where those new rates are for you and to know where they are moving forward when you then change them again. And the same goes for your camera angle as well. Ideally try to just change one thing at a time, then go out there and practice it. Now if you go out and your rates are way too slow or way too fast, change them straight away, of course. But if you go out there and you're like, okay, this seems okay, get used to it first, and then when you make the changes, you'll be more inclined to understand the differences and the nuances with those changes that you make. Now, just like NASCAR, when I first started flying, I just turned left constantly. Left turn, left turn, left turn. And when I tried to then fly and do a right turn with a flip or whatever, doesn't matter, a dive or a gap, I really struggled. And this is a phenomenon that I just thought was relatively nuanced to me, but it seems that it's relatively common to a lot of pilots. You'll get comfortable flying either left or right, and you'll make most of your turns to that direction. And when it comes to, again, trying to nail something the other way out of necessity or art form, just fun, you'll struggle. So again, what I did is I genuinely was turning left for the majority of my flights. So I took 4 or 5 packs out one day and I just flew turning right non-stop. And then the next day, it was right to left, right to left, right to left. And then I introduced the left turns back on their own, and away we went. Repetition is always going to be the key to learning. And sometimes you have to sort of also understand, hang on a second, I'm doing this same thing over and over and over again. Let's just change it up a little bit. But it takes a bit of time to break that habit. So sometimes you will need to grab yourself a pack or 2 or even 5 and just do the opposite. Trust me, your skills will thank you for it. Now this is one that comes down to the legality, I suppose. You take off in the park and all of a sudden you've got loads of people getting all excited because you've flown maybe too close to them, in their perception of course, or the dogs are chasing it and whatever, and then you land and then you've got people in front of you shouting at you. Always have a spotter with you. It's a legal requirement. But not only is it a legal requirement, it's a safety point of view as well. You don't want to be surrounded by, a horde of angry parents or angry bystanders. It's not worth it. There is a misconception about drones by certain people because of certain events in Eastern Europe for the past couple of years. And unfortunately, us hobbyists are taking the brunt of it. So make sure you fly legal, fly with a spotter, and try not to buzz anybody. And just give that perception and try and keep that connection between us and members of the general public as friendly as we possibly can. Now, again, a similar one here is you go out, you have a crash, and then you realise that you've not got insurance. And if you've hit a Bugatti or a footballer, it's going to cost you millions. Do you have millions spare? And this is what I always say to people. If the worst happens, can you cover the cost? If you can cover the cost out of your own pocket, don't worry about insurance. But if you can't cover the cost out of your own pocket, make sure you've got insurance. If I hit a Bugatti or a Lamborghini, I couldn't afford to fix it, not even close. So I've got insurance for that very reason. And on a shoot a few months ago, as I mentioned a few times, I don't necessarily do a lot of professional shoots anymore, but on a professional shoot a few months ago, I came within about a foot of hitting a Lamborghini because of reasons. But yeah, if I had have hit that Lamborghini, then ultimately my insurance would have covered that because it wasn't my fault. Without insurance, I'd have been in a real bad situation. So always cover yourself. As somebody who's recently got into long range, this is one that I've seen happen quite often to people, and it's not good. What happens is they'll get themselves a drone and the first thing they say is, how far away can I go? I'll give them the legal answer, yes, but how far can I go? And they'll go off on a long range mission. Sometimes they'll do that without the knowledge that they need. Always test your GPS before you head out on a long range flight. What do I mean by that? Well, again, I've shown this in a few videos. Take off, make sure you have GPS rescue on a switch, press that switch. make sure that drone turns around and comes back to where it's taken off from. And then that way, you know, if you are doing a long range flight, legally of course, when you are out of sight and miles and miles down the road, if the worst was to happen, you know that it's going to come back to you. But make sure you can learn to understand your link quality, your DBMI values, and just know your systems, because long range, the jeopardy goes up and up and up with every sort of unit of measurement that you go away from yourselves. And as cool as it is, and it is cool, and I've learned the coolness of it very recently, with greatness comes great responsibility. So just please do bear that in mind. This is what I probably still do today, but you've had a crash, you've gone out, you've done the walk of shame and recovered it. The first thing you should do when you pick up that drone is unplug that lipo. There's many reasons why. It's crashed, it could short out, it could be touching something, it could set fire, there could be a problem with the battery, or it could even get interference because of the crash and decide to arm up in your hand and, you know, cause untold problems. The chance of any of that happening is low. However, do you really want to take the chance of losing a hand or a finger or whatever and not being able to fly FPV again? That is a real quick crash course into a lot of the tips that I've learned in the last 11 years. It's not comprehensive. I'm sure there's many more that I could think about, but that's certainly the first itinerary, I guess, of issues. One other point I think to note is I'm not going to be held responsible for any FPV addictions that you get after watching this. FPV is incredibly addictive, and it's really hard once it's bitten you to get out of the hobby. It's a wonderful, wonderful hobby to be in. So yeah, be prepared. You'll be going deep, I'm sure. Share your tips in the comments down below. Let us know what you've learned and what you would like to tell your younger self then, or your more inexperienced self back then, that you've learned and that you know today. And until next time, peace out.